Hello everyone, welcome to task 10, which is the last task of our SQL injection video series. So before we tackle the last task, let's do a quick recap of the previous task. So we had task 1 where we did a brief introduction about what we're going to see in the subsequent tasks. Then task 2, we learned about what databases are. In task 3, we talked about structured query language. In task 4, that was where we delved into the actual vulnerability, which is the SQL injection. Then from task 5 to task 8 are our lab or practical labs where we had to actually exploit the vulnerabilities, the various SQL injection vulnerabilities in web apps. So in task 5, we dealt with inbound SQL injection. Task 6, we used blind SQL injection to bypass authentication. In task 7, was also another lab that had to do with blind SQL injection, but it was a Boolean based blind SQL injection. And then task 8 was time based SQL injection. That lab was an interesting lab. And then in task 9, we talked about out-of-band SQL injection. So the last task, which is task 10, we're going to look at a way to remediate or prevent our web application from all these attacks. So as impactful as SQL injection vulnerabilities may be, developers do have a way to protect their web applications from them by following the following advice. So I think we have 3 methods here that we can use to actually prevent our web applications from being exploited with SQL injection. So the first one is using prepared statements, that is with parameterized queries. So in prepared query, the first thing developers write is the SQL query, and then any user inputs are added as parameters afterwards. So in this case, the SQL queries or commands are different or are sent differently to the database server for execution, and then the data or any user inputs also sent to the database as data. So by so doing, we actually prevent ourselves from any injection attacks. So writing prepared statement ensure that the SQL code structure doesn't change, and the database can distinguish between the query and then the data. So mostly any user input or data is handled during execution time, so it's separated from the SQL query. And then a benefit is it makes your code look much cleaner and easier to read. So that's one benefit of using parameterized queries. And also it has a performance gain, like it gives a performance boost to your database system, because a database server can compile and cache prepared statements, resulting in faster execution. So that's another advantage you can get by using prepared statements or parameterized queries. And also the second method or way we can prevent ourselves from attack is by input validation. So we need to validate all our input. So input validation can go a long way to protecting what gets into an SQL query. So employing an allow list can restrict input to only certain strings, or string replacement method in programming languages can filter characters you wish to allow or disallow. So if you don't want to implement the first measure, which is the prepared statement, you can do input validation. The fact is that with prepared statement, the database server actually handles the validation of whatever whatever input data comes to it. So you don't need to do the validation yourself. So it does the string replacement, and then special character escaping. So it does all that at the database server level, so you don't have to do the validation. But if you don't want to implement prepare statement, then you can do your input validation yourself. All right, so the third method is escaping user input. So allowing user input containing characters such as apostrophe, double quote, dollar, or backslash can cause SQL queries to break, or even worse, as we've learned, open them up to injection attacks. So escaping user input is the method of prepending a backslash to each character, which then causes them to be passed just as regular string and not special characters. So this is also another way to try to escape all special characters, so that they don't get executed, because if you allow them, they may break the SQL query and then make your web application vulnerable to SQL injection attack. So basically, these are the ways we can prevent ourselves from the attacks. And let's see, the question that follows is name a method of protecting yourself from SQL injection attacks. So we have three methods here: prepare statement, input validation, and escaping user input. So here is not actually explicit which particular method they wanted to use, but we can assume we can start with the first one. If it's correct, then that should be the answer they are looking out for. So name a method of protecting yourself from SQL injection exploits. So say by the use of prepared statement. So let's see if this is right. And yes, we are correct. And this marks the end of our SQL injection series. I hope you enjoyed every bit of it, and hope to see you again in another series. Thank you.